We did it.
I think we did it. I think we did it.
Awesome. So we're live.
We are live.
That's great. Streaming from the COVID ward of the Weisman Hospital / Homestead. I'll apologize in advance for all of the. Of course, no one's listening yet, so I can save my apology for later.
Or get it out of the way now.
That's right. We could put all the caveats in now, and that way, even if people didn't see them, they were still there. So.
Yeah. Check the tape.
And we're recording this for posterity's sake or for looping later.
Yep, we are in record mode.
All right. Well, we should probably say something interesting then. Let me introduce everybody. And I'll start with short introductions and ask you to do longer ones. First off, let me introduce Sen, who's been nice enough to help host this for us. And Sen and I met when I was recently on your podcast, which was, I think, Meeple Syrup, which I love the name.
That was one of them. Yeah. It's one of them.
So you've done a whole bunch of tabletop design. Let you do a quick intro for yourself, and then
sure. Yeah, I do lots of tabletop design. I do role playing games with Banana Chan and myself. Did Jiangxi Blood in the Banquet Hall, and I did Kingdom Rush, the board game, and Harrow County. No, I didn't do Harrow County, but I did Mind Management, the board game, and all sorts of stuff. So lots of stuff in tabletop over the last decade and a half, and I'm here helping out Jordan, and yeah, there you go.
Well, thank you so much.
Anytime.
And next up, I'll introduce Ryan, who I met. I think, let's see, you were out of swaddling clothes, but not by much.
Yeah, I mean, early 20s, you're basically just a big baby. Yeah, I think I can't actually remember when the first time we met was, but I definitely remember going to Gen Con with you and HBS and shouting a lot. So I got your attention there.
Yes, yeah, and you helped us out with the launch of Golem Arcana, and then we did all sorts of projects together, and now you're off as a lead narrative designer on a big video game.
Yeah, it's kind of wild to think starting back in those Golem Arcana days, but even then, it's learning a lot, and feel very thankful and lucky to be here. Now I'm the narrative director over at Cold Symmetry, working on a secret project that I'm not allowed to talk about at this time, but hopefully one day I will. But I still have a lot of love for tabletop and RPGs in my heart, so I'm excited to check out what you've been cooking up here with this tool. And I want to say I have a copy of all your games basically right in front of me. I'm like, I have Bluebeard's Bride, Blood in the Banquet Hall in the board game closet. It's a bigger box. And then I, of course, also have Battletech and Shadowrun right here on my computer. So I just think that's neat.
That is neat.
Wow. That's pretty impressive. That's awesome.
I did not.
And Whitney, I think we first met when you were tasked with taking some odd collection of notes I had for an RPG setting and actually make it into something good. And we've enjoyed talking many, many times on all sorts of projects over the last, God, it's been like a decade now, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's been a long time now. Oh my goodness. So hi folks, my name is Whitney Beltran, and I am also in narrative and games. I actually didn't know you worked with Banana Chan. That's hilarious. I've also known her for a really long time. We got started in the TTRPG freeform stuff together over on Google+. So I think we're all one big happy family here. So I was the narrative director for 4 years at Hidden Path Entertainment, where we were working on an open world Dungeons and Dragons ARPG. Most recently, I was running my own video game company out of Bangalore, India. We were focused on the Indian market. That was really exciting. But now I'm back in the US working on narrative design again. And I've had a very long history that started with LARP, actually, then into tabletop RPGs, where I made my game Bluebeard's Bride, which Ryan mentioned is on his shelf. It's a very horrifying fairy tale game. And then from there, worked my way into video games, and no one has been able to get rid of me since. So here we are.
Oh, that's great. Well, thank you all for joining us today and helping us talk about endless adventures and narrative games in general, and the broader stroke of that. So I thought what we do is I'll show some videos of different things that we've been doing inside of the Adventure Forge engine, talk about different structures of narrative, and then just because we're stupid, I'll go live into the tool and try to make things in real time that we come up with as we're talking about it. Which started with a challenge you guys gave me yesterday. So I do have some stuff I built from our discussion yesterday. We'll start from there. But before that, I'll show some video, and I've muted all this so we can talk over it as it plays.
And I assume if folks want to hear the videos, they can go either to the Adventure Forge website or directly to the Steam page to get all that lovely audio.
So this is an example of one where what we wanted to do is kind of walk through quickly, as in that was already done, different modes of storytelling. So the first one was kind of pure text only, choose your own path style, much like what we worked on together in Sea of Legends, where you have a page of text and then options that the player can choose from, and then transition to more of like, a visual novel style experience, where you have, busts of characters and you can move them around and change their poses and so on. And then this goes into isometric RPG. And part of the reason that we put all of this into one tool, as opposed to like traditionally where they've been set up into different tools, is to encourage all sorts of cross-pollination and really give designers and story authors and artists a much wider palette of tools to be able to mess with. The ability to move terrain around is one of the big ones I wish we had at HBS, because it gives you all sorts of really fun kind of opportunity to movement puzzles and so on, as well as verticality, being able to climb up on stuff and ladders and all that kind of good stuff.
I'm curious too, like where did you originally get inspired to, with this idea of the no code engine? Like, does this begin with HBS and Shadowrun, or does it even predate that? Or
well, I mean, I think at every company, I think to me, the process of making a game is always first you kind of come up with what you think the game should be. And then you do a bunch of prototyping to vet that idea. And then you have to build the tools that you're going to build the game with, right? Because at least my experience, and I'd be interested in your guys' experience, is that you want the engineers as far away from content as possible, and you want the content team, the designers, the writers, the artists, the ability to quickly iterate their work as quickly as possible, because iteration equals quality, right? And everything we design sucks the first 10 times we do it. So I've always had that task, that kind of goal of how to, empower creativity to the greatest extent possible. And HBS was, a great proving ground for that. We developed a lot of tools at HBS, starting with even our first mobile games, Crimson Seam Pirates, which was great because we were able to do level design without any kind of engineering input. And then, into obviously the Shadowrun and other tools that allowed us to, get most of the way there, but not all the way there. Like, we couldn't introduce new game mechanics. And that was, to me, one of the big things I wanted to do here was to make sure that designers could create new mechanics, right, without having to have engineers involved. So yeah.
So Jordan, a follow-on question to this is, obviously this tool, I think, is meant to democratize the ability to do more storytelling in games because it's more accessible. What are your hopes for players who pick this up? Like, what do you want to see come out of them using this tool?
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, Whitney. I mean, I have two goals in it, right? One's selfish and one's more broader, right? The broader one is indeed, the goal of trying to democratize the creation of video games, so that we can get a much wider audience creating games. And to me, that's important, right? Because the whole world plays games, but a very small percentage of the world makes games. And this means that the perspectives being shown, being offered in games is pretty limited. And I think that's not, I think society could benefit from a lot more diversity of perspectives and life experiences being shown in games. I also think it's good business, right? People like seeing themselves, and their communities reflected in games. I also hope that we're going to see a lot more innovation. Even those of us who've had the benefit of working on teams and having engineers available to create stuff, they're expensive teams, and so you only get so many kind of innovation, so many opportunities to experiment and try it, and try an innovative thing before, like, financially you have to kind of lock it down and start to move into production and towards ship. And so my goal and my hope is, and this is where the selfish part comes in as well, which is I just want a tool I can screw around with and keep trying to make things and find new new paradigms and new mechanisms and new ways to tell narrative games. So that's the hope. And then in terms of players, the hope is that by having a tool set out there that so many people can use, we can actually get closer to a true creator community, a creator economy, excuse me, like an Etsy, where you don't need a million people playing your game to make a living, right? If you find a great audience of a couple thousand people, then it becomes a nice sideline business for you, right? And you've got an audience that you can entertain, and who sees themselves or found something meaningful in your work. So we can kind of create, hopefully, these micro communities around different creators and creator teams.
There's so many follow-up questions I could ask to that, like how does that work? Like, if I wanted to make games with your tools and platform and I guess make money off of that, like, what is your vision for how that works for creators?
Yeah, so the plan, and it's a plan, not a reality yet, because we're getting into early access soon, but is that we would the Adventure Forge application would be a free application on for Mac and PC, and eventually for iOS and Android. And inside of that application, you have access to all the games created by ourselves and by users of the tools. There'd be a DLC purchase to unlock the authoring tools. A small purchase, be able to get in and start creating games and publishing them to inside of the Adventure Forge ecosystem. And then if you choose to monetize, you can. You can say, "Oh, I want to charge 10 Forge coins for this game," and then there's a revenue share between us and the creators. Which, the way we've structured things, we are going to be able to be much more generous in terms of the rev share than competitive other UGC environments. And part of that is because we are charging a small amount for the tools. It then means that we don't have to build the entire structure off the back of the few people who are creating monetized content. So that's the general way that we're approaching it.
That makes a lot of sense.
I'm going to show this is a trailer for one of the games that our team is developing, and it uses when we launch Adventure Forge, there'll be 4 kind of established graphic sets for isometric. One was the kind of magical version of Renaissance Venice that we saw in the previous video. And then we have kind of this low polygon look that is we have a science fiction, a modern, and a fantasy version. And so this one, our team has built a short little adventure of waking up on a derelict spaceship and trying to figure out what the heck's going on. And it's a really fun, classic kind of structure, but it works out really well.
And I'm going to ask the dumb questions just to clarify, but so all these assets are available if you are in the creator side of things, but you're also free to upload your own assets as well for your sort of universe or your playset you're working on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, these are only meant to be starter sets for you if you want to get in and start building something right away. But you can then upload all of your own graphics, right? Actually, it's a nice segue. I'll show one. This was one that came out of a game jam, where it was the artist came up with this look and created this wonderful little kind of lily pad and this cute little game about all the creatures waking up, and the Oni creature, the guy with the horn there, trying to get to his breakfast, but the big stone thing's in the way. Excuse me. And so he has to go around and talk to all the other characters and help them with their breakfasts and get everything going and solve all the puzzles, and then eventually get to his breakfast. But it's a very different look and feel, right, than the kind of stuff that our quote unquote standard or supplied graphics are.
So in the chat, Kat's asking, would you allow creators to create assets and then other people purchase those assets from each other?
So eventually we want to have a big sophisticated asset marketplace. As of in the beginning we won't, but people could do that through other marketplaces, itch.io, or through even DriveThru RPG or so on, to sell assets that people could use inside of Adventure Forge. Eventually we'd love to have that easier access and more integrated, but that will be an early access feature. Yeah.
So an important question here, Jordan. So you said this was made during a game jam, which I assume means pretty quickly. How easy are these tools to use for someone who's never scripted before?
Yeah, interesting question. So I would say that you have to think like a game designer, right? You have to think in logical couplets, like if this, then that, right? And if you could think, if you're used to thinking in that kind of way, then actually it's pretty quick to be able to put stuff together, right? We decided not to go down the AI route, where we would just type a prompt and try to have the system create the game for us, because I just don't. I believe a lot of games are getting made that way. I just don't think there's a lot of them that we're going to want to play that are created that way. I think I'm interested in your guys' perspective. I think games are a collection of countless numbers of tiny decisions, all of which have incredible impact on the game. And being able to fine tune and tweak a game like that is so critical to make it a great game. And AI prompting is not really an efficient way to do that. So we went the other direction. We said, well, how do we give very explicit control to the creators, right? So like the first version of this game was built in a one-day game jam, right? And then we went back into it with the creator, and we added, some more dialogue, and we added the mini game, kind of to help the frog find his breakfast. It's a memory game, and that took another day or two. So I think in total, Oni represents probably 4 to 5 man days, something like that. Something in that range, right?
That's pretty quick.
Yeah, it was a very quick one. I think something like the Icarus experiment, right? There we're probably looking at a game that's about 20-ish minutes long and really deep in terms of content there, and that probably has 3 to 4 man months in it. Total between the artists and the writers and the guys doing the logic. But it is really fast. We'll you guys gave me some prompts yesterday, and I went and built it last night in a couple hours, and I'll show you what we've got there. I'm
curious though. Before we jump to that, I just had to ask. Okay, since you mentioned this game jam a few times, I'm like, okay, so that means there's already some existing community out there that people can start joining. They can start getting in their hands on Adventure Forge right now or soon. What's the time?
Well, yeah. So right now, this week obviously is Next Fest, and that's the best way to get your hands on it and try it out right now. It's a free demo in Next Fest, and it's a constrained version of it. So basically, there's an intro adventure that you can play through, and then you can start using it like Play-Doh and reshaping it and make what you want out of it, which is what I'm going to show today, where I built your request. And then, so that's it. And then there is some that we also have a closed beta going at the moment, where we've invited some people into closed beta where they have access to the full system. But that's even, that's only about 2 or 3 weeks old in terms of getting people into the closed beta. So it's all new and shiny.
I see. They're not even that farther ahead than someone who jumped in this week, really.
No, you can catch up real fast.
Get in now. Now.
Right. Get in there while the bugs are fresh.
Yeah, just a quick question before we move on to the disco ball. So somebody on Steam asked,
You're spoiling. Yeah, go ahead.
well, okay, I mean, but they asked, well, they said, this is so cool, first of all. And then they asked, was all of the stuff that we saw with the Oni made inside the Adventure Forge tool? So I'm not sure if they mean, did they make the graphics in Adventure Forge or did they import them into Adventure Forge?
Right. So, so Adventure Forge is not a graphics tool. It doesn't have a paint system or a 3D modeling system. So you have to make your assets outside of it in whatever tools you prefer, Blender or Photoshop or whatever, and then bring them into Adventure Forge to build your adventures with them. And you can bring, basically, we have a couple of core tools, which we'll go through, the isometric, which is where the environments are built out of 2D assets, and then the characters are 3D assets, or our interface tool, which is used from everything from the keypads to the books on the shelf you saw in the first video, to mini games like the memory game or hidden object games, or actually some really, really sophisticated mini games are being developed inside of one that our team's working on called Dairy of the Dead, which actually I'll show that one real quick, because it just unfortunately doesn't show some of the mini games, but you'll get a sense for kind of what it's looking like. And I love again, they took the standard, their kind of low poly modern one, and then messed with it to create a fun little zombie game here.
Even the cat's a zombie. I just noticed that.
Yeah, and he is both your pet and your antagonist. Something that Whitney might be familiar with that giant creature on your lap recently.
You could have just said cat. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, your cat's is demanding milk, and you have to explore it, get out into the zombie world, and go find it for them. But the team did a bunch of really great, very sophisticated designed mini games, everything from like chess puzzles, pathing puzzles, and other ones, which were then implemented in that same 2D tool. What do you so in terms of narrative, right, and thinking about narrative game dialogue and puzzles and interaction, right? One of the classics in film is show don't tell, right? What do you think when you're looking at a narrative game in this kind of structure? How much do you try to put into actions, and how much do you rely on dialogue?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go first, and then I'll think of a smart answer while you're talking.
I mean, I think we have to understand that video games have different priorities, right, than other forms of storytelling media. And so you take the priority of player agency and you put it first. So one of the things that we have actually talked about before was this idea of when you have a choice to make in a narrative game as a player, the choice is volitional choice, which means you understand the ramifications of the choice that you're about to make in ways that matter to how the outcome is going to go. And so however you telegraph that volitional choice, whether it's through actions, whether it's through clues in the environmental narrative design, whether it's in the dialogue itself, it actually doesn't matter as long as it is conveyed. A lot of people think narrative is just lines, but narrative is actually in the music, it's in the environmental level design, it's in the combat moves, it's in everything. Everything tells the story of the game. Yes. And so you reach for all the tools to make sure that you don't overload your dialogue and have to say everything in the dialogue where they won't understand. Because if you're doing that, then you are missing opportunities in other places.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think environmental storytelling is one of the strongest tools you've got for doing narrative in games, right? Because it's kind of stumbled upon, it's investigated, and by nature then has more agency for the player versus endless spewing dialogue at them. Yeah, Ryan, you've now had time to say something smart.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I've come up with the greatest answer ever. But so that was just super well put, and one thing I kind of wanted to add there is I think, we have this different responsibility with games where we have to convey this information that is like useful for the player in a way you might not have to with like a film script. It can be as like bewildering and minimal as possible. But I will say, like, in my career, I feel like now more than ever, my biggest rule is to say less, and just like really challenge yourself to do that. And as Whitney's pointing out, like, how do you do that? It's like, well, narrative isn't dialogue, right? It's everything. It's all of the game, all your mechanics, all your animations, everything can evoke that. So like, if you're interested in narrative design or working in narrative design now, like, you know, you probably know your role is to be the champion of the narrative and draw together different parts of your team to help make that happen, especially people outside your discipline, because they're going to be potentially as vital or more vital than you might think to make that narrative true. But yeah, these days, mostly I'm trying to write I'm working so much harder to write as few words as possible is really my goal. And I think Hades is a great example of a game that gets the balance right, personally.
Yeah, I always go back to the Mark Twain line, right? If I had more time, I would have written a shorter letter.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, if you're coming like from tabletop RPGs, you're used to writing, you know, hundreds and thousands of words, and then you see a modern game script, and you're like, what's the big deal? It's just a few words, and then you go ahead and you try to do that, and you're like, oh my god,
holy cow, cognitive load.
Yeah, exactly.
Well,
right, because I mean, I think as game writers, we tend to pack a lot of meaning into the words that we do have because the real estate is so precious. Like,
yes.
A lot of times you want your dialogue in specific to do triple duty, which means it's telling you something you need to know about actual gameplay, like a grenade is coming at your head.
Yeah.
It is telling you something about the character that is saying it through characterization.
They don't like grenades.
It is doing world building. It tells you something new and interesting about the setting of the world or the themes of the world at the same time. And if a line can do triple duty, great. And if it can't, you got to think a whole lot more about how it can.
Yep. So we have some questions from the Steam stream, which is a tongue twister in and of itself. So a lot of people are asking, are we able to create visual novels using this tool?
Yes. Yes, you are. Absolutely. And so the videos had a couple examples of that. And why don't we jump into the tool and practice live wire, high wire acts without a net, and try to make stuff in real time, including a visual novel component.
Perfect.
What are your guys' favorite visual novels?
Oh, that's a good question.
Wow. You're about to out
what
me.
Is a visual novel?
Oh, your favorite one. Mine is definitely Hateful Boyfriend. I love Hateful Boyfriend.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the top ones.
Yeah. I'm mind blanking on the ones I've read. But yes, I think that's all right. I'm going to dive in. So what we're looking at here. So
it's just avoiding the question,
right?
Oh, absolutely, totally dodging the question completely. Oh, look there, pigeon. So these kind of horizontal line of scenes in Adventure Forge, you have a series of scenes, 3 types: a basic scene, a 2D scene, and an isometric scene. And then in the scene, you can then put events on top of the scene. So in a basic scene, you're putting like a static background and then putting events on top of it. 2D scene, a dynamic 2D background with events on top, and an isometric, as the name implies. And so these are the scenes that make up the demo game that's in the Steam Next Fest. And for our little demo, like you'll be able to do at the Next Fest, I just went off and started to create my own. So I added a new scene here, which is an isometric scene. And we can see, if I click here, we'll see the environment that the scene is built on. I use the same environment that that the Next Fest demo did. But then I took out and replaced the characters and added some new things.
How did you do that? Was that all just drag and drop?
Yeah, pretty much. So if I want to add a character, I can click on a character and then position where I want the character to start, right? And then I can double click on the character, say which way I want them to face initially. I can set on interaction logic. So like when the player taps on this character, what should happen, right? And I can have conditions so that different things happen at different points, right? If the character is happy and you click on them, you go into this dialogue, or if they're sad, or if they're wounded, or whatever you want. And in our system, all logic is created through a series of English drop-down menus. So if I want to say, for instance, that the adventure tag credits, has to be equal to or greater than, or this one is an outcome. So I'm adding so it's going to add the number, 3 or 2 to that outcome. So in this case, you use those drop-down menus to make any logic, and I'll show more of that later. And I'm going to get rid of him because he's don't have the right logic center for him. So when we looked at this yesterday, you guys said, hey, why isn't there a disco?
I think Whitney said that. I can't take credit.
Yes, I demanded a disco ball.
That's right.
You demanded a disco. So so I built one for you. So if our character comes over here and engages with this, because Ryan said, I want a keypad. Show me how a keypad works and make a keypad for me. So I did that. So here you can see as you mouse over the keys of the keypad, they go down. And if I, enter in a code and then hit, submit, if it's wrong, it just disappears. And in this case, the code, the correct code is kind of the first year that disco really took off in mainstream culture. Any guesses?
Does chat know?
Ooh, yeah.
Can chat figure it out?
Does anybody in the chat know when disco was a thing?
When disco launched.
I'm putting in ones.
Yeah.
What's the last number?
Gosh, what if the player doesn't know? How are they gonna activate this pad?
So we'll get to that in a second. But first, we'll show the disco ball. So 1970, you get the answer. It says party, so we know we got it right. And there we have a dance floor. Yay! And if we move into the dance floor, she's going to dance. I didn't have a dance animation, so she just kind of jumps. But you get the idea. She kind of, does jumping jacks for her dancing.
In the far future, that is considered great dancing.
That's considered dancing. Absolutely. Absolutely. But to the other person's questions, like, how do we create a visual novel? Why don't we do that now? So right now I've got where if you see, that's called a bug. But if I go over here and talk to this guy, it's going to use our text system. We do a little conversation, right? And in this case, we told him that the other guard is talking shit about him. So he's like, wait, I'm going to go give this guy a taste of my mind. And he goes over here and they start a little fight. But we can then change that to a visual novel. So let's do that. So instead, what we're going to do is we'll create a 2D, we'll create a 2D scene, which we will call visual novel. And we'll start by dropping a background. So these are all the assets that come with, kind of the basic graphic load. And then, of course, you can, update, you can upload anything you want. So we'll grab one kind of the sci-fi environment that we're in. Let's see, maybe go with, go with that one. So we position the background. And then you can grab a character. Oh, actually, hold on. First one we'll do is go in this one and rename this background.
That's key. Look, whatever you're doing in game dev, please properly name your assets.
Yes.
You will link yourself in the future.
All right. So our character here, and we'll put her in and position her maybe, I don't know, something like that. We'll call that player character. And then we'll grab the person we're talking to in this particular case, which is, I think this guy here. And we'll flip him horizontal so she's facing the right way. And we'll name him Alien 2. And so we now have those two and two characters on screen. And then if we go to the adventure now, so that's in the background, right? And now we want to put events on top of that. So we can do a new conversation. And I'm going to window that conversation so that it fits in the center of them.
I see, and then we're getting a preview, okay, of how it would actually be on screen. Great.
Yeah.
I'm already having thoughts about what's going on. By the way, I've got a whole.
You got a story.
Idea.
Good.
You got some preconceived notions.
Yeah, I do.
We're gonna need a story. All right. So, what's our? So we'll do a node. Who's saying it?
Okay, here's my pitch here for the alien. He's a doctor. He's the onboard doctor, and he says, "Weird. Their toes, they're tapping. Their hips, they're wiggling." Referring to the person in the cryotube, of course.
Okay.
It's the disco disease.
You found it, yeah.
All right. Never have a dyslexic type in real time. So
believe me, it's very embarrassing for me too, Jordan. I'm a narrative person and I can't really spell. Like,
yeah, I think we're all pretty much guilty of that by now. Like Google does so much of the spelling for me. I kind of just wiggle my fingers vaguely in the shape of words.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan, are these jorts related?
Wow.
Would like to know.
That is an interesting question. Seems like a bit of an in-joke, perhaps, which may not translate to the rest of the worldwide audience, but we'll see. We'll see what's going on with this person in the cryotube, I'm excited to see, Whitney, how you're going to have the player character react, or gosh, maybe give them multiple possible choices, some sort of narrative decision.
No.
If you can
Not
imagine that.
Branching. No.
All right, so you want to introduce some choices? All right. And here we'll just connect these lots up here, so because you can just do arrows to connect them. All right, so we have choices. What choices do we want to offer the player? And so open up the choices here. I can just type them here. What's the choice? So we have it's weird people dancing.
The text was it's weird. There are people basically dancing in the tube. I can't seem to control it.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of them is we should do diagnostics to see what's wrong.
See what's right.
You did that just so that I could screw up how to spell diagnostics. Okay. All right. That's
we could change it to probe if that's better. If that's easier.
Yeah, that's okay. Mm-hmm. Next.
The other is I've seen this before. We have to jettison them into space.
Yes. Way to escalate there. Like we're not gonna mess.
We're not messing around.
Got my attention. All right.
Okay. All right. So then we need what those choices result in. So
I have to think about more things.
Yeah, you're up.
You can run diagnostics
for a doctor. Yeah, I think we could do something like brain imagery is lighting up like a Christmas tree.
All right, and
like it. And then maybe something about oh gosh. How about we go into, well, you're the captain, whatever you say. No resistance.
Way to pass the buck.
Yeah, you gotta live with your choices here, player. They're not gonna fight you on this.
All right. And then what I'm doing is going to put logic at the end of these that return us back to the isometric, which is we're going to go back to the scene. It's called taking it to mods at the end of those, just as a quick example, because no one expects brilliance real time.
But we're going to bring it. We're going to deliver it.
I'm just praying it works. That's all.
Good test. Turns out this is a lot of what game dev looks like.
All right, and so then what we're going to do, so this is a separate scene here, and we have to connect to that scene. So what we're going to do is if we go into isometric and we zoom in on that alien, whereas before he was going to the conversation inside of this scene, we're going to change that to where he's going to go to the visual novel scene. All right, and let's hit play and see what happens. Likely spectacular failure. So we go over, we talk to him. Huh?
Well, it works.
Yeah, I got to set the text. The default text is too dark, but we can fix that. We'll run diagnostics. Okay, so we got some tweaking to do there, but let's do that.
While you're tweaking, we have a question from the Steam crowd. Erdinx is asking, what application of Adventure Forge are y'all the most excited about?
What are we most excited about? I'm excited to have people. I mean, I just want to see the expressions of what people make. I think one of the things, and this is kind of unique in the panel we have here, is that this panel has worked both in tabletop and in video games, which is not all that common these days. And one of the fundamental differences is in tabletop. Let me start with video games. In video games, it's the development team that's creating the story. It's creating the potential paths and directions and outcomes that the players explore. In a tabletop, that's really different, right? There we create the setting and the mechanics, which are really, even in that case, just suggestions to help fuel the creativity of the game masters and players. But it's the game master and players who create the stories, create the actual games, right? And that's why I think tabletop is so vibrant for so many years, is because it just has so much more creative scope in it, and so much more, ability to be reflective of the desires of so many diverse player groups. And my hope is with Adventure Forge that we can see those kinds of diversity of storytelling and everything else come out to the get made into video games. That was not the most elegant, but you get the idea.
I'm just excited to see all the things that'll come out that y'all have never planned for, where all of a sudden it's like someone's made like an action RPG with dodge rolls and all sorts of wild stuff, dating sims. Well, I guess dating sim you would expect, but you know what I
mean. Yeah, dating sims are a great application. All right, so what I did here is now I'm going to make this a little bit more sophisticated. I've added a couple of states to her, and this concept of state is something that goes all through the tool. So everything can have different states, and what a state means is it reflects itself visually different, audibly different, and behavior different. So you can have different behaviors tied to different states. So if we look at let's see, this is the default, but now I'm going to have change the image for talking. So we get a different pose there. And then I'm going to give it another one for surprised.
I see where you're going with this when you tell them to.
Yeah, so now we've got three different kinds of poses that the character can transition to, and we'll do the same for her. So I'm going to go over and manage the states and add a talking state and a surprise state, and let's see, maybe an angry state. And you can make up as many states as you want, right? You can just type a new state, and so as you're doing your design, you can decide what the states are appropriate for your game. And then let's see here. For her talking, we'll upload that pose. For surprised, and for angry. All right. So now that those are in our visual novel style, we can then go and control them through our conversation. So if we open up the node, first thing I'm going to do is override the default style and make the text much brighter. And then let's add so that when we get to this node, we're going to change the character's pose. Hold on. Oh, you see, this is why you shouldn't do things live. Because I
was gonna say, well, you're looking for that. I was kind of curious what you think, Whitney. If you could give someone advice who's watching right now and they're going to get into Adventure Forge and they might be making their first ever game, I'm kind of curious, what advice might you give them for how to accomplish that, in a reasonable manner? Because I feel like that's a huge first step for someone to take.
I mean, that's a good question. My advice would be kind of the same advice I would give for a game jam, which is make a 5-minute game. Like, pick one mechanic that you're like, cool, I understand this and I can use it over and over again. Maybe it's hitting things with a stick. Maybe it's going through A/B story choices. Whatever it is, pick one mechanic, make a 5-minute game, right? Video game design knowledge is all about experimentation and scaffolding, right? You want to be really curious, but you also want to finish what you make. And I see a lot of folks get really excited and then bite off more than they can chew. And then usually a quarter to a halfway through, they go, oh no. And they get really overwhelmed and they don't touch it again. And then they don't touch anything else because they're like, oh, I got to finish that thing. It has a freezing function. So make a 5-minute game.
Start small. So I feel like a lot of people have dream projects that they've probably been thinking about, and maybe save that one for later down the line and just try something tiny. Not Baldur's Gate.
Well, and you're never going to run out of ideas as a video game maker. Like, ideas are unfortunately a dime a dozen. You can have 12 great ideas, right? So work on something that's related to your big idea. Like, don't wait on trying to make it. But like, you're not going to make an MMO as a solo dev in a year or 5 years or 10 years, right? And so if this is really new to you, like, give yourself like a way to be successful.
Right.
Yeah. I when I teach like at USC, I always really encourage them to think really small, and it never fails that the student will come back and say, so I've been thinking about this, and my first game is kind of like Destiny, only a little bit larger.
No, kiddo.
Yeah.
And they totally miss that whole point.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I think that's even more so true with something like Adventure Forge, right? Being able to quickly iterate and start with something small, is really, really critical. All right, so if we go over here, then we can talk to this guy, and we're just going to tell him to follow me, and from now on he's going to follow us around, and then we'll go over and dance.
I assume there's nothing stopping us from adding, our own sound effects and everything too. When I make my own disco ball at home, like we can kind of upload that and drop it in essentially.
Well, we probably want him to dance when he gets there, so we can. And right now there's a bug where he'll walk into the same square with us. There are many bugs. That's what they call it. But yeah, to your earlier question, it's kind of like, how does a player know that disco that code is looking for 1970s? Well, we can put that into this main console here as an opportunity. So when we have a main console conversation, and we can add, like, for instance, a page of text for that. And I happen to have a little article on
the history of disco.
It's like
on
you
the history of
planned
Discord.
for this.
As if I had planned ahead.
Amazing.
Which clearly I wasn't planning that ahead because I wasn't practicing on something.
Speaking of documentation, while we work on this, what kind of documentation can new developers look for when they're building stuff with this platform?
Excellent question, and always in development. So what we have at the moment is we have about 20 tutorial videos, which we're constantly updating because we're constantly making it better and adding new features. And so, but those about 20 of those videos to get you started, and really encourage people to just start by looking at those, and then we do have a big wiki, which will which we can search and find all the terms and stuff, and that's in constant evolution as well. And then there's the Discord community, which is going to be really supportive of asking questions and sharing techniques and everything else.
Quick question, Jordan. So Kat asked, Jordan, is there a way to assign states to characters specifically so that it's easier to select the right one when you're trying to select states for that character, and they only that character has that state?
Yes, when you create states, you can assign whichever states you want to whichever character you want, or prop or tile or 2D module, and so on. So you can use those states in a really, really flexible way.
Okay. We do have some more questions if you're willing to answer them.
Yeah. I'm willing to make up stuff
As we go along.
much as
All right. Silent Bird asks, will the games made in Adventure Forge be executable, exported as an executable? That's a better way of saying that.
Not initially. It is something that we're looking at in terms of how to support in the future. And there's a couple different possibilities of how we do that. But at least in the foreseeable future, for early access period, which is going to be someplace in 6+ months in early access, they would only run inside of the ecosystem.
Okay.
All right, let's see what happens if we go over here. And if we can now, oh, well, I didn't put in the word disco. Okay, so let's fix that.
That's just the text being dark?
Yeah, I got to fix that too.
Kevin asks, how many themes do you have for pre-made assets? There's sci-fi that we can see here. Is there also fantasy and other themes?
So yeah, the kind of base ones that Adventure Forge has during early access is sci-fi, fantasy, modern, like you saw with the zombie game,
right?
And then the magical Renaissance Venice for the Tales of Fortunata, which is a new little game environment that I've been working on.
Ooh, there's another question I've been meaning to ask, which is, okay, how does it work if, say, me and Whitney are working on the same project? What's the collaboration tools like?
Excellent question. Thank you. All right, tell me about disco. Yay, there's all about disco. Okay, and then this will automatically scroll and stuff when if it needs to. Yeah, so the collaborations that excellent. So currently, you can invite collaborators to your adventure that you're working on, but only one person can be working on the adventure at a time, which is pretty much similar to most of the tools out there. But I'm very excited that we have in development a feature for real-time collaboration, so that you'd be able to invite, Whitney and Ryan together, and we'd all get online, and we can then all be editing the adventure at the same time. The lockout, right? Instead of locking out the entire adventure, the lockouts now become super atomic. So if I'm, editing the character Sally, no one else can edit that character, but you could be editing a different character, an environment, tiles, props, whatever. Logic or narrative, all simultaneously. And every time any one of us saves, that is propagated to everybody who is online. So it's kind of like the Google Docs, if you will, of game dev, with no merges or builds or any of the kind of complications that we have to go through with code-based stuff. So we've done a lot of work on this, and we have it, working at about 70% at the moment. And so that's going to be one of the key features that we'll be releasing during early access.
That's huge. I think I'm unreasonably excited about that. It may not sound very flashy, but like I'm just thinking about how much time I spend a day to day hitting like get latest, submit. All right, reopen the engine. Like there's so much downtime in game development.
It sounds so much nicer than P4.
Yes, exactly.
We have another question. George Drayer's asking, are there any plans to allow for full motion video integration like Tex Murphy style?
No, unfortunately not. Not on the list at the moment. Underlying what we're working on, this is all built on top of Unity. You don't need to ever have Unity because this is its own exe. But Unity doesn't deal with video super well, and our current file structure system doesn't deal with files that large very well. So that's why our cinematics are using that 2D tool and then moving things around in the 2D tool. But yeah, so unfortunately, the answer to that one is not for the foreseeable future.
Right. Speaking of visuals, Hellscar asks, is there a way to manipulate lighting in isometric scenes? Can we make the entire scene red, for example?
Oh, yes, indeed. So when I built Whitney's disco, I took a light and then via logic was able to change the colors of that light randomly to a series of I had 4 different colors, and it randomly changed them. But when you're building your environments, I guess I didn't really show the environment tool. I will show the environment tool. So if we go over to the editing, we go to locations and we edit the location. So this is the one that's being built on. And you can set individual lights. Like this is, hold on, let me go to lights. So this is the light that that I use for the disco, and I then change that light called experimental light, and I change it to whatever, via the logic. But if you go to a different light, for instance, and you want to say, oh, let's make that one red and let's set the intensity really high and the range really big. You can change. These are spotlights, and then you also have the global light, right? So if I want to mess with the global light, right now it's a blue, but I can take it up into reds or hot reds or whatever, and it's change its alpha to change the effects of the global light as well.
Moody.
So you've got pretty complete lighting controls. And then in building environments, the way is you start by, well, here, I'll zoom out and go over to a different area here. Go away from what we're building right there. So, you start by just laying down tiles. So I can grab, floor and start to paint them in. Should probably turn up the global lights here though for a second. All right, so we can see what we're doing. So I can build
verticality. I assume is not an issue or a limitation.
No, you can have steps and ladders and ramps. Right now, there's you have to set them in particular ways, but we're making that simpler. But yeah, you can have ladders to climb up and down, steps to go up and down. You can go build tunnels and go underneath and so on. You have to be conscious of sight lines to make sure your players are going to see what where the characters are going. But you can verticality is which was always a challenge for us at Harebrained Schemes, but here you can
right.
Build anything you want. So if we want to grab this couch here, right, and we can plop down the couch, we can then flip it around and grab a chair, put a different chair in, and so on. So you build your environments by just building different stuff. Then you can grab decals, and pop decals around, and you can set foregrounds and background decals for it. And actually, that's let me show this video real quick, because this was you mentioned Hades earlier, and one of our closed beta testers took our system and used those foreground and background decals to create a very warped kind of interesting perspective where, so basically the isometric is sandwiched between really big background and foreground paintings. In this case, he kind of adopted a little escher-esque. That's a hard word to say.
Escher-esque?
Escher-esque.
There we go.
We got it.
We got it.
I'm not going to try that one again. Anyway, kind of where everything's a little off skew. But, this has such a different look from anything that we've done, which was really fun, to see him be able to do that. So these decals, both interior of the scene from blood splatters or like you saw sparks or smoke or other things like that going on in the environment, can then also be used in foreground and background. And we're also just finishing now a export and import. So you can just white box your level out, export it, take it into whatever paint program you want, paint over it, and then bring that back in, and it'll line up all of the Z sorting for it. So then you're kind of freed from tile layout at all. You can just kind of, white box for all your movement and cover and stuff, and then bring that in, paint
that
it.
Sounds nice.
So yeah, I'm super excited about that. That feature will be online within the next 3-4 weeks. So very excited about that one. So the beta tester who went off and did those incredibly cool stuff with the, we were so impressed with it. We were oogling and ogling it. So he went and blew us away again. This demo where he created, just used some existing models and then create a little story about, teasing a witch. And when they tease the witch decides to take her ball and go home. In this case, the ball is the color of the world. So she sucks the color out of the world as she leaves. And then if you're nice to her, she puts the color back into the world.
That's really cool.
Yeah, our jaws with that one. We were like, wow, how'd you do that? And again, no engineering, just him messing with the tools. But he did it through using an animated animation. So you can't have animations which are built on frame-based animations and he built it for the background and had the background change. So super cool. One of the
I think we only have a couple minutes left, Jordan. What do you want to say as the thing that everybody remembers?
No pressure.
Oh yeah, that's no pressure there. Be kind.
It's a good one.
That's the most important thing. I said, yeah, be kind, make cool things. I mean, that's really the goal of this, is to empower people to make games, tell stories. And I've and I think all of us have had the honor and the privilege to make games that have impacted people's lives, and we hear those stories at conventions and online. And the goal is to empower more people to have that opportunity. So that's what.
Well, thank you for inviting us to be a part of this initial exploration into this amazing tool. It's really great to hang out with you and to talk about this stuff. It's so exciting.
Well, thank you. I appreciate your time and all your support. And Ryan and Whitney and Sen, thank you very much.
I will say this though, before we get off, next session, I want to see a skill check. All right.
Oh, right. Yeah. We all forgot about skill checks.
That's on my list of things.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to do another one of these on Thursday, hopefully. And we will deal with skill checks.
This is the cliffhanger ending.
Yes. There will be skill checks.
Excellent.
All right. Awesome. Well, thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Jordan.
Bye,
Thank
folks.
you. See you later.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.